Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry for getting started about a minute late. We had, as is very typical for me, a few technical difficulties, but we're ready to go. Thank you, first of all, for all of you joining us this afternoon, and thank you well in advance for volunteering your time to join us at Capitol Hill Day in 2019. We're very, very excited. There we go. My name's Abbie Evans. I'm the Senior Director for Government Relations at Mentor. I'm joined today here in DC by my colleagues Adriane, Alicea, and Max Stricky. For those of you who have attended in the past, you're well familiar with both Adriane and myself. Max is new to us this year, and we're really grateful to have him on the team and helping us out to make Capitol Hill Day another success this year. Obviously, as every year, we're really excited to have a Capitol Hill Day portion to the National Mentoring Summit. We think it makes the already excellent event all that more exciting and beneficial, and we're really excited to take advantage of all of your talent and enthusiasm and expertise. And that's really been showing up big time this year. We've already surpassed our total number of participants for last year, I think a week or so ago, and we expect a handful more, perhaps a few more dozen folks to register between now and the actual summit. And to that point, if you know anyone, if you are on this call and you have not opted in to participate in Hill Day, we hope you choose to do so. And if you know anyone else who's coming to the summit at the end of the month, please encourage them to join us. It just makes the event all that more better. All right, so I'm going to quickly go over the agenda for our presentation today. This presentation is really about basics. We're not going to get into a ton of detail, for instance, on the bills that we'll ask you to talk about, the legislation. We will cover them in generalities, but we'll talk about those in more specifics when you're with us on Tuesday, January 29th here in DC. But today we're going to go over goals for your meetings and some of the logistics on, for instance, how you're going to get from the Summit Hotel to Capitol Hill on Wednesday the 30th. We're going to go over some materials and what you can be doing back home to prepare yourself. We're going to talk about the app. We're going to talk really briefly about the bills and issues that we will ask you to talk about during your congressional appointments. We'll talk about the feedback form and a new thing we're offering this year, state check-ins, which we'll talk more about in a few minutes. And then, of course, as every year, we're going to have a Q&A at the end. And I would say feel free to hold your questions until the end, or if you prefer, and in some ways this might be easier, please go ahead and just enter your questions into that box. I think there's a little icon of someone raising their hand. If you click that, you can type in a question, and we'll see that as we're going through the presentation. That way we can try to lump together similar questions, and to the extent that's possible, we'll try to respond to some things live as we go. So I think it's really helpful to kind of level set for all of you and talk to you about what we think are the goals for successful meetings. And I just want to say from the outset, what I mean by successful is successful for all of you. Your success will make this an event. Will make this a success for Mentor. So please don't be worried about whether we're happy with your performance. Just be prepared so that you feel comfortable and that you feel like you can deliver the message and talking points that you want to share with your members of Congress and their staff. So those three things I think that really sum up successful meetings are strengthening or perhaps establishing a relationship with your representatives, or senators and their staff. We're going to be sharing with all of you when you're here on the 29th your schedule for congressional meetings. You will notice at that time that many of them are with congressional staff, and that is perfectly okay. Congressional staff play a really important role. Sometimes those meetings are actually better because you get more time and there's more of a dialogue involved. So please don't be discouraged if you're meeting with staff. Another marker for success is you being provided this opportunity to educate members of Congress and their staff about your programs, about mentoring, and the issues, challenges, and opportunities that you all face back home in your states and communities. And that third bullet there, encouraging members of Congress and their staff to support key policies. That's the portion that we're going to help you guys prepare for, and is a really valuable thing for them to know. This is your opportunity to tell them these are the simple things you can do right out of the gate as a member of Congress to support mentoring here as a member of Congress. I'm going to pass it off to my colleague, Adriane.
I'm going to talk a little bit about our advocacy workshop. Our advocacy workshop is hosted at the Summit Hotel on Tuesday, January 29th from 2 to 5 p.m. Registration for the summit will actually be opened early before the workshop, so you can actually grab your registration items before heading to the workshop. We'll communicate exactly what time registration will be open to you via email, but just be sure to grab your items. We want to be able to see your name tags and get to know all of you during the workshop, so it's great to have those items with you. This year you may have noticed that the advocacy workshop is a little bit longer than last year, and that's in order to cover a little bit more helpful information for both Hill Day and beyond. We have a really exciting workshop from the Congressional Management Foundation, and they're actually a nonprofit based in DC that trains both Congress and advocates on best practices for constituent and congressional communications and operations. They're going to present to all of you on how to effectively tell your mentoring program story to Congress. The government relations team are also going to do our normal presentation, all the important logistics and legislative items to help you prepare for Hill Day. But during this workshop, you're going to receive two really critical things for Hill Day, and that's your Hill Day t-shirts and your folders for congressional meetings, which we'll talk about a little bit later in this presentation. I'm going to briefly go over the agenda for Capitol Hill Day, and again, during our advocacy workshop, we're going to go into this in a much more detail, but here it goes. At 8 a.m., you'll begin boarding the buses at the Renaissance Hotel. Many of you remember there are these trolleys that take you over to the Capitol Visitor Center. At the Capitol Visitor Center, we'll have a light breakfast outside the room, and you'll receive a really wonderful greeting from a member of Congress, as well as some remarks and final tips and best practices from Abbie. And then from 10 to 4 p.m., you'll have your meeting. And then at the end of that day, we have the really wonderful welcome reception in the Kennedy Caucus Room. And that's a really good opportunity to connect and network with your colleagues. And I will tell you a little bit more about the welcome reception later on as well.
Okay, so as you can see on your screen, this is a map of Capitol Hill here in Washington, D.C. And I think this map does a really great job of showing you the scope and scale of the Capitol Hill complex. Often you will hear us and other people here in D.C. refer to Congress as the House side and the Senate side, and that's because the buildings are divided that way. Senate on your screen is to the right of the Capitol building, which is right there in the center of the screen, and the House buildings are on the left-hand side. If you look at the numbers on the screen, the buildings numbered 9, 10, and 11 are the Cannon House Office Building, the Longworth House Office Building, and the Rayburn House Office Building. And then if you move to the other side of your screen, the buildings labeled numbers 4, 3, and 2 in that order are the Hart and Dirksen Senate Office Buildings, and number 2 is the Russell Senate Office Building. So you can see there how it's not enormous, but all the buildings aren't right next to each other. So you will see when we hand out your congressional schedules when you're with us on Tuesday the 29th, we'll do our very best to try to lump your House and Senate congressional meetings together. We're not always able to do that, but we will try our level best so that you don't have to trudge back and forth multiple times. The arrow on your screen now is pointing to the entrance of the Capitol Visitor Center, which is in the basement of the United States Capitol. As you just saw on the slide that Adriane took you through, the Capitol Visitor Center is where our kickoff breakfast is on the morning of the 30th. And as she said, we'll bus you all from the Summit Hotel downtown up to Capitol Hill. In fact, if you can see where the arrow is pointing, if you look up just about half an inch, you see that the street there is labeled First Street. The buses will drop you off there. You'll walk down a sloping sidewalk into the security entrance of the Capitol Visitor Center, and then we will gather in the auditorium that day. Later that afternoon, during the welcome reception from 4 to 6 p.m., that is held in the Russell Senate Office Building, and that's what the arrow is pointing to there, the building labeled number 2 on your screen. Oops, sorry, I went one too far. Just real quickly, I think most of you know this, but I would never want to make an assumption and set someone up for anything less than success. It's just really important to consider security on Capitol Hill, similar to what you would find if you go to the airport. Every time you enter a new congressional building, as well as the U.S. Capitol, you'll have to go through security. There will be armed Capitol Police officers all over the Capitol Hill complex. Please do not be alarmed. That's normal. They will most likely ask you to remove your coats. You'll have to put all of your bags, anything you're carrying with you, through an x-ray machine. They are very serious about security, as you can imagine, in Washington. So please do not bring any sealed envelopes. We'll talk later on about folders that we'll provide for all of you to put your own materials in. So please don't feel like you have to bring sealed envelopes. They will make you open them. Or tell you to throw them out, which of course we don't want. We don't want any of that wasted. And obviously no weapons of any kind. And just so you know, here in DC, mace is actually illegal. So please leave mace and any pocket knives at home. Just a tip then for you all, no cans, bottles, food, or beverages are permitted in the Capitol Visitor Center, where our kickoff breakfast will be held. You can bring reusable bottles if you'd like to fill them up with water or whatever throughout the day. They just need to be empty when you enter the building. And here, again, I feel like most of you know this, but just in case, just some tips on what's appropriate to wear for Capitol Hill Day. Now, as Adriane mentioned, we will be providing all of you Capitol Hill Day t-shirts when you come to DC that we will ask you to wear over whatever business or business casual attire you choose to wear. But in addition to that, I recommend comfortable shoes, and particularly for those of you who like to wear heels, just be thoughtful about that because you'll be doing a lot of walking. Please avoid jeans, and obviously this is one of those occasions where your own personal politics and your beliefs about specific issues, you are entitled to them, but we're here representing the mentoring movement, so please keep anything partisan at home, and just remember that we're all here to talk about the same issue and to make some really important positive progress. So this may or may not be necessary. I like to think that if you're joining this presentation and or have already registered for Capitol Hill Day, that you already understand the value and importance of mentoring. But I still get this question, or we still get this question relatively frequently. What's the point? And I think, you know, at the heart of it, this is about the young people that all of you serve and support every day. Who better to advocate for them than the people who volunteer to be mentors or work for programs who are doing their level best to support young people in their communities. And beyond that, I think for congressional staff, you'll be hard pressed to find any member of Congress or their staff who doesn't see intrinsically the value of tying a young person and a caring adult together, whether it's tied to specific desired outcomes, you know, chronic absenteeism or the like. But your stories and your experiences can make mentoring and mentoring relationships and the desired outcomes from those relationships much more real to members of Congress and their staff. And when you get together, you're in DC, you're talking about the ways that those members of Congress can support them legislatively and back home, because that's why you're there, to talk about your specific programs. So, you know, hopefully, again, you either already agreed or I've convinced you that advocacy is important. So why participate in Capitol Hill Day? Well, I think that the most obvious answer is you and 1,200 of your colleagues have already decided to pay money out of your pocket or your organization's pocket, taken time out of your day to travel to DC, to get together with other passionate and experienced mentoring advocates. So why not take that passion and experience and excitement and channel it into our government and make sure that, our elected officials understand the role that they can play to make a very positive difference in the lives of young people in their communities and states across the country. I think, a little more, brass tacks, in-person meetings, in-person advocacy tends to be the most effective means of communicating. So you'll be there looking them in the face. You'll be able to respond to questions in person. They'll be able to think of your face the next time an issue pops up and say, oh, maybe I need to talk to John about XYZ issue that's just come across my desk. You're going to make that personal connection with them, and it's incredibly effective and incredibly important. So before you come to DC, there's a couple of things that you can do. Actually, before I get into the items I've listed here on the bullets I've listed here, I do want to flag for you one of the new items we've added to the things we're doing to prepare for Capitol Hill Day this year is to do state-specific check-in calls. Those actually start tomorrow. So you should have received by now some sort of communication from one of your state captains, either Adriane, Max, or myself, or if you reside in a state where Mentor has an affiliate partner, one of the staff or representatives from that affiliate has reached out to you. They should have shared with you when your state's check-in hasn't occurred. If you have not, for some reason, received that communication, more communications will be coming out this week, and we will also be sending out 24 hours before your state's check-in call, a reminder email specifically on that check-in call. So hopefully we've covered all the bases. If for some reason you've kind of slipped through the communications path to this point, hopefully we'll catch you up in time so you can join your state's check-in call. But in addition to those state check-in calls, the things you can be doing now are thinking about what you want to talk about when you're in your member of Congress's offices, your program, the work you're doing back home. What do you want them to know about your work? What do you want to ask them when you're here in DC? Obviously, we'll give you a few ideas specifically on DC-based legislation or issues, but you have some specific ask, I'm sure, that you want to make of them as well. Now is the time to be gathering the facts and stories, and anything local that you can share, particularly with representatives, will be welcome by your members of Congress. For those of you who, most of you will have at least one colleague joining you, state colleague joining you in your congressional meetings. We only have a small number of states who currently only have one registrant. So it's really important for you guys to be planning your group strategy. And the bigger those groups get, the more important that is. If there are 5 or 6 or 8 of you in a meeting, particularly with a representative on the House side, you want to make sure everyone has an opportunity to speak up. So when you're here on Tuesday the 29th, we'll give you some tips and tricks on how to do that, but we'll also be seating you guys together so you can put faces to names and talk about who's going to raise which issue and make sure that everyone will have an opportunity to talk. And again, that's another thing we hope that you guys use the state check-in calls to get that process started. And I mentioned earlier, we really hope you all bring materials to Washington to share with your members of Congress. So just make sure to print off enough of those before you come. Mentor will not have access to a printer for you. I do believe there's a FedEx at the Summit Hotel if you would like to use that, but it might just be easier to print those and pack those in your luggage. During your meetings, this is an opportunity, again, for you guys to prep when you're before you come to DC, and then at the advocacy workshop on Tuesday. But when you're in the room, you want to make sure everyone gets an opportunity to introduce themselves. Try your best to stay on topic, and it's really natural. You'll be amazed. I bet most of you will have at least one experience while you're here where you meet someone who went to your high school or grew up in your hometown. DC, particularly Capitol Hill, just is a small world, and it's so often that happens. So don't be afraid to engage in chit-chat. That will help make an emotional connection. Just be cognizant of your time and try not to waste too much of it on chit-chat. And make sure that you get an opportunity to tell your story. Why are you so passionate about mentoring? If you have a personal connection or you work for a program and you've seen some really inspiring things, that's a great opportunity. That's a great story to share and to tell. Whenever possible, try to get a commitment either from the member of Congress themselves or their staff. They may tell you they'll get back to you. That's okay. That's a type of commitment. You'll just have to make sure to promise to follow up with them if you don't get a direct yes or no or agreement, whatever it might be. Try your best to allow time for questions. Again, don't be afraid to leave behind the materials. We'll talk in a few minutes about exactly what we'll be providing you to make that easy. And of course, you're here, you're participating, take a picture, and we hope you share them on social media as well. So Capitol Hill is kind of a funny place. For those of you who have been, I bet one of your biggest memories or biggest impressions is how young staff are. That's often the response that I get from a lot of people who come for the first time. But Capitol Hill is just a really busy place. So you have to be flexible whenever possible. It's not likely, it's certainly possible that your meeting time or even location might change. We will be able to communicate with you through the app that we use. Adriane's going to talk about that in just a few minutes. So we'll do our level best to communicate with you if something happens day of. Try your best to be flexible. I mentioned already Hill staff are very young. I think the best piece of advice I can give you is to treat them with as much respect as you expect in return. If for no other reason than that they're responsible for briefing their bosses on your conversation. So it's really important to make a good impression, and I expect them to be respectful of you as well. Your meeting might be short, but I got to tell you, most congressional offices will try their level best to extend their time with you if at all possible. And Hill offices, particularly House offices, tend to be quite noisy. So it may feel a little hectic, but please know that congressional staff are paying attention, they're taking notes, and just try your best to block out the noise.
So I told you a little bit about these coveted Hill Day folders. Hill Day participants will receive one folder for each appointment. So that's not one folder for each person. That's one folder for every appointment that your entire state has scheduled. One person will go ahead and actually, from your group, grab those folders, and they will have the folders for the entire group. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that these folders will include the following items. One of them is a legislative issue sheet, and that's basically a flyer about Mentor's legislative platform and some of the bills and issues that Abbie and I are going to talk to you about in a second, as well as an invitation to the welcome reception. I talked to you guys about this a little bit earlier. It's a really great hard copy, letting members of Congress and staff know that they can join you afterwards and have snacks with you at 4 o'clock. We also email this invitation to the staff members who you're meeting with this month as well, but they're going to forget about it and they're going to love that you handed them something physically that day as well. You'll notice that one side of your folder will be completely empty, and that's in order to put those materials that Abbie talked to you about earlier about your mentoring program, the About You, any information that you have that you want to share with them. That second part of the folder is there for that. And the Hill Day app is back this year. As you might remember, the app allows you to view a personalized agenda for the day. And it tells you all the logistics of your schedule, meeting locations, times, etc. The really great thing about this app is that we are able to text you if any changes come up. So if a member says, I need to meet at 3 o'clock instead of 1, we text the entire group from your state and tell you the meeting is now at this time, or something has changed, the meeting is canceled. It's just a really good opportunity. Now, most of you have your cell phone numbers in here. If you remember not putting your cell phone number in when you registered for the summit, or if you don't remember if you did, please email one of us and we'll be happy to put your cell phone number in the system so that you get these notifications. In the app, you can actually also view specific talking points for each member of Congress. You can find out, if they co-sponsored legislation that you're going to talk about. You can find out if they're on an important committee related to mentoring, and it really gives you a whole really quick view, and it's so easy to just open up your phone and find that information as well. So the Capitol Hill Day app sign-in is really easy. It's actually not an app. It's a website that's linked inside the Summit app. So you need to download the Summit app in order to get the link to our website. That's the caveat. You log in with the email address you used to register for the summit. If you don't remember what email address you used, that's okay. Just email me and I'll tell you what email address you used to sign up for the summit. You don't need a password. You just need your email address. It's very, very easy. Now, once you've signed into your email address, with your email address, this is what your agenda will look like. Just note that you and your colleague might both be coming to Hill Day, but because you may not reside in the same district or for a number of other reasons, you may not all have the same meeting. So don't be alarmed if for some reason you have 5 meetings, but your colleague has 4 meetings. That's intentional. So the agenda that you see here, and this is just how you'll see it on your app too, provides you with the name of your member of Congress. So if you were in this meeting, you'd be meeting with John Yarmouth. It will also tell you if you're meeting with the member of Congress or with a staffer. As you can see in the example below, it tells us that this meeting is actually, the second one with Rand Paul is actually with his staffer, Natalie. For the top one, you can see it says meeting with Rep. Yarmouth, so you know the difference of whether or not it's a staffer or whether it's the member themselves. We have the ability to actually put in notes on here too. So if we had added a note to this, you would see that I may have added that the meeting was with Natalie, but Rand Paul might drop by for a minute and say hello. He's not staying for the whole meeting. So you get all that information here as well. It gives you the time of the meeting, the location. If you click on talking points, it would give you all those relevant talking points we talked about as well. And it gives you a biography of them as well. You'll know where they're born and where they went to school and what their spouses' names are, and more information that I think you might need to know about them, but pretty helpful. The app also provides you with maps of Capitol Hill and anything else you sort of a marker for you to use as you're using it. And I think that's it for now. Okay.
So the next 2 slides are about the bills and issues that will prep you with much more detailed information when you're here in DC on the 29th. But we wanted to give a quick overview of the ones that will probably make the list for Capitol Hill Day this year. And before we get into the specifics or the generalities, I should say, I just wanted to pause for a moment. Lots of us participate in things throughout the year and aren't really sure of the impact. And I just wanted to pause and give you guys 2 very specific examples of the real positive impact Capitol Hill Day has had in success for mentoring related legislation here in DC in the last 12 to 16 months. Last year, for those of you who participated, you remember we asked you to help us ask members of Congress to help restore a cut to the only mentoring-specific funding line item that exists in the federal budget. It's actually housed at the Department of Justice in the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, or OJJDP. The OJJDP Youth Mentoring Grant received an 11% cut in its fiscal year 17 funding. That was the biggest cut we had seen, I think, in the grant's history, and it was both a shock and had a very real and negative impact on the number of programs and the amount of the awards to each of those programs that was granted. And through your work, not only did we restore that cut, we actually got an increase to the grant in FY18. The only reason I can't tell you whether we further added money in FY19 is because the Department of Justice and therefore the OJJDP, the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, are caught up in the current government shutdown. So we don't have our final FY19 funding level yet. But for those of you who participated last year, you probably remember, in addition to helping us restore the cut from FY17, we asked for $100 million last year. So we are crossing our fingers and are feeling cautiously optimistic that we might achieve that goal. And hopefully when you're here on the 29th, the shutdown will have been averted and we'll be able to tell you for sure. But that's just one example I wanted to share with you. The other really exciting really, really positive impact that all of you had very directly is that we had the Child Protection Improvements Act signed into law last year. For those of you who are familiar with Mentor and have been following us for a while, you know that CPIA, as we affectionately called it, has been a legislative priority for well over a decade, actually well over 12 years. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with CPIA, it's a child safety bill that would make access to FBI fingerprint background checks universally available to any youth serving organization who wants to use that as part of their screening practices. finally, this very common sense, free to taxpayers program was signed into law last year, and our sponsors of the bill told us very specifically that the work all of you did for us during Capitol Hill Day last year made an incredible difference. So thank you, and those are just two examples of the really positive, real impact Capitol Hill Day has. So we're excited for you guys to join us again this year and to help us continue to make really great positive impact here in DC in policy and funding. So specifically, we're obviously funding for the OJDP Youth Mentoring Grant will continue to be a priority for us this year. The OJDP grant will be the only funding specific ask we will make or ask you guys to ask of your members of Congress this year. And specifically, we'll be calling on $120 million for the OJDP grant in FY20. And I know some of you may be thinking, well, wait, you just told me we don't know the final funding level for FY19 yet. That is true, but believe it or not, Congress can do two things at once. And so while they are trying to hammer out the disagreements on the final remaining bills for FY19, they've already or soon will be starting their FY20 work as well.
I'm going to talk about some of our other legislative priorities during Capitol Hill Day as well. And again, it's going to be a very brief overview, but we'll go into much more detail during the advocacy workshop. The Foster Youth Mentoring Act, some of you may remember it, is sponsored by Rep. Karen Bass in the House. The bill provides grants to either establish or expand mentoring programs for youth aging out of the foster care system. So program recipients can either train mentors on effective practices for mentoring young people in foster care, and this bill really emphasizes those different support needs for both resources and social capital that foster youth need. This year, we're asking everyone to ask their House offices to co-sponsor the bill when it's introduced again this year. You'll notice that there's a different ask for the Senate, and that's because last year, this bill was only introduced in the House. This year, we'd like to focus on getting it introduced in both the Senate and the House. So we have that commitment in the House of Representatives. We don't have that commitment yet in the Senate. So we'd like you to really talk about this bill and hope that one of the senators that you meet with might be interested in introducing it. The next piece of legislation is the Transition to Success Mentoring Act, and that would create a program that awards grants to both schools and nonprofits to establish school-based mentoring programs for youth transitioning between middle and high school. You could use the funds to train mentors, cover materials, and the success coach or the mentor really develops a very comprehensive plan for the mentee and works with the school and the guardians to help really support academic achievement, but also serve as an advocate for that young person. This ask is similar to the Foster Youth Mentoring Act in that we're asking members of Congress in the House to co-sponsor the bill. It was already introduced last year by Andre Carson, and we're asking members of the Senate to support the introduction of this bill as well. The Mentoring to Succeed Act is a bill that was introduced by two Illinois senators, Dick Durbin and Tammy Duckworth, last year. It was really created in order to address violence in their communities, but it would create a grant system that supports school districts and community-based organizations to establish mentoring programs, and it really has a really wonderful trauma-informed basis of it and the way that it supports young people in mentoring programs. We, in this ask, are asking members of the Senate to co-sponsor this bill, and we're asking members of the House to support the introduction of this bill. The feedback form. So, during the advocacy workshop, while you're sitting at your table or at your seats, depending on the size of your state, I would suggest electing one or two people who are going to fill out your feedback form. If you came to Capitol Hill Day last year, you'll remember that we changed over to doing it via the mobile app. This year, we're going back to hard pieces of paper. You'll be given those during the advocacy workshop. As you know, participants are required to provide feedback for each congressional meeting they attend. Again, that's for the entire group, not for you individually. Now, let me tell you why these are so important. It will allow your group to tell Abbie and I how your meetings went. It'll provide us information on whether members of Congress want to co-sponsor legislation, if they told you some amazing story about how they're a mentor or they have a really great connection to our mentoring program, we definitely want to know that information so that we can follow up with them afterwards. Please remember to try to include as much information as you can remember from your meeting on these forms. Some of the questions that we ask you are, did the legislator agree to co-sponsor a bill? Did they say, yes, no, or maybe to having a personal connection to mentoring? Do they have an interest in maybe introducing a new piece of legislation not on the current list that we've asked them? It really does help us follow up with them and help us support your work as well. So this year, you can return the feedback forms at the welcome reception. We'll have a collection box there. But if you don't get to it at the welcome reception, that box will be transferred to the Mentor Government Relations booth at the summit, so you can give it to us any of those times. And if for some reason you can't hand it in during that time, you can take the form back with you, fill it out, and scan it and send it to Abbie after the summit. But this year we have a sort of a new game. If your state submits all of their feedback forms, one lucky person from your state will be entered to win a prize, and that's a $50 Amazon gift card. So you'll definitely want to do it this year because you might have the opportunity to win a prize. There is a deadline, though, for returning your feedback forms, and that's Friday, February 8th. So either get them in at the welcome reception, at the mentor booth, or via email, any of those ways, and you'll be entered to win this great prize. So I think we've talked about it a few times, but I just wanted to reiterate again how wonderful the welcome reception is. It's a great opportunity to spend time with other mentoring advocates in a really beautiful room in the Capitol. You have these gorgeous views of the Dome, and you can take photos with your friends. Congressional staffers attend, and sometimes members of Congress stop by. The reception is open to all summit attendees from 4 to 6. So if you have colleagues who came in later and couldn't attend Hill Day but are there for the welcome reception, they should definitely come to Capitol Hill and join us. There's appetizers. It's a really wonderful place to mingle. There's a light program. We have usually a really wonderful mentor-mentee match who come and speak about their experiences. And just for a logistics standpoint, just so you know, it's in the Kennedy Caucus Room, and that's actually on the 3rd floor of Russell Senate Office Building. It's a little confusing because the 3rd floor, when you enter the building of Russell, you're actually on the 2nd floor, not the 1st floor. So all you have to actually do is go one flight up and you're in this room. And just remember again that we have an invitation. It looks just like the one that's on your PowerPoint right now in your folder that you're going to be able to hand to your congressional staff and members of Congress during Hill Day as well.
Okay, so we're getting close to the end here, guys. Hang on with us just a few more moments. I mentioned earlier, and I think Adriane did as well, that we added a state-specific check-in call with all of you this year, and we're really excited to get those started tomorrow. They're going to happen all this week and all next week. The purpose of these calls is really, we want to keep the calls brief. We will extend them as long as necessary. We're budgeting 20 to 30 minutes for each call, so hopefully it won't take up too much of your time. The point is really to give you all an opportunity to ask any questions you have. We'll do really, really high-level reminders, for instance, when we expect to see you on Tuesday the 29th at the Summit Hotel. But really the main purpose of this call is so you can ask questions and you can start talking among each other about ideas you had to raise with your members of Congress and get some feedback. Inevitably, one or two of your state's participants will have probably done this before. So if this is your first time or you're feeling a little unclear about exactly what are the types of things you want to raise, you can start asking each other questions. You can ask us questions. We really hope that you guys take advantage of these, and we hope that you find them useful. And if you have not received, for some reason, the information about when your state's check-in is, you can shoot either Adriane or myself an email. We'll share our email addresses at the end of this presentation. But we will also be sending out proactively 24-hour reminders 24 hours before your state's check-in. So hopefully you get that last-minute reminder and you can sign up so your calendar prompts you. Okay. So if you have a question, please type it into the questions box in the bottom. Okay. I'm going to move away from this slide just so you can see our contact information. But Max has actually already kind of grabbed a few of the questions for us, or summarized for us a few of the questions you guys have already submitted. So one of the questions is, what kind of materials or information about my organization should I bring? Excellent question, Lori. Thanks for asking. So if it helps you, and I find sometimes it does help program staff to think about things this way, anything that you believe would be of interest to potential funders are the kinds of things that members of Congress are going to want to know. They want to know how your program works. So if you're a mentoring program, the types of kids that you work with. If you're a STEM-based mentoring program, you have different interests, needs, and desired outcomes than a program that is designed to reduce, community violence, right? So they want to understand who you're serving and what you're doing, how many staff you have, really general information around funding and budgets. I don't want to caution any of you against talking about funding of your programs, because that is so critical. But don't waste too much time on it. I think any member of Congress who deserves their title understands that nonprofits and any worthy community-based organization often struggles to find funding. So again, I'm not going to tell you not to talk about it. One of our asks is about federal funding for mentoring, but I just don't want you to waste all of your time. Talk about the great achievements you've received and what you're hoping to do in the next few years. If your goal is to serve 100 more kids in your community, or you're a city-based program and you actually want to expand to the surrounding region, right? Talk about your goals, what you're achieving, your challenges, your opportunities. So really just think about, those kind of data points that tell your program story. Have those handy, or have those summarized in a nice little program or pamphlet. But when you're talking about your program, try to talk about that in terms of stories. Talk about the mentors and the mentees in your program. Talk about the challenges you might have in recruiting mentors, but and the extent to which you go through to make sure that mentors are properly trained and supported for their mentor-mentee matches, right? Talk about the realities of your program, and that means the good and the bad. Another question we received is, how can I get access to the app?
Sure. So you'll be receiving an email from our Summit organizers that actually teach you how to download the Summit app. When you go into the Summit app, there'll be a link in order to get to our app. So hold tight, and when you get that, you'll get it. We'll also send a separate email that gives you a link to the website as well, a little bit closer to Capitol Hill Day. But all of the meetings are not complete yet, so we don't want you to go in just yet.
Okay, we got a great question from Sadiq and Sydney about whether or not the shutdown might affect Capitol Hill Day. The honest answer is probably not. Even if part of the government is still shut down when you guys come to DC, odds are it won't affect your congressional meetings. And the simple reason for that is congressional staff and congressional offices are funded separately from the agencies that are currently affected by the shutdown. Technically, if the entire federal government was shut down, Congress and their staff can and often do still come to work and try to resolve and reopen the government. So it should not impact Capitol Hill Day. I will say there is a possibility, and we will be sure to communicate this very, very clearly if we see this starting to pop up, that the longer the current partial shutdown goes on, there might be interest among some on Capitol Hill to show solidarity to federal employees and start not closing their office, but sending some of their staff home. So they'll be operating with smaller staff. That might make finding someone to sit down with you challenging, but not impossible. So I don't think that is likely to happen, but I think it's important to be honest and transparent with all of you. We will communicate as much as necessary to make sure you guys understand whether or not you have appointments when you get here on the 30th. So another question we got was, how can I schedule how can I get your schedule and your materials and your best practices if you can't make the orientation? And I assume by orientation you mean the advocacy workshop on the 29th. So here's the thing. The 29th is very, very important, and we encourage all of you to attend in person for at least part of it, if not the whole thing. We have not gone so far as to say it's mandatory, but in effect, it is. And the reason for that is because so many of you have never done this before, and it's really the only opportunity for all of us to get you together, make sure that we're setting you up for success for your Capitol Hill Day meetings on Wednesday the 30th. If you absolutely positively cannot do it, please reach out to Adriane or myself, and we'll talk to you. And hopefully you're attending from a state where there are other folks who will be attending, and they can kind of take the responsibility to brief you, make sure you're up to date, make sure that you get your T-shirt and you know where and when your congressional appointments are. This is actually a really great opportunity, kind of separate but related to Advocacy Workshop, is that we schedule your congressional appointments as states. So whenever possible, I'm just going to pick my home state of Pennsylvania. We try to schedule all the Pennsylvania participants in Capitol Hill Day for their meetings with their two senators, Senator Toomey and Senator Casey from Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania actually has a big group of participants this year, I think over 20 at this point. And so that's a big group who are meeting with those senators. But we think it's really important for it's logistically easier to do it that way, but also it makes a really important impression on members of Congress when they see how many folks from Pennsylvania show up and care about this really important issue. Regardless of, kind of irrespective of the advocacy workshop, it's really important for you to be communicating and getting an idea of who from your state is participating. If your state captain is either me or Adriane or Max, we have shared with you the list of your state's fellow participants, and I imagine many of if you live in a state where we have an affiliate, like Maryland, like Sadiq in Maryland, I'm guessing, I don't know, but he has probably shared that list with all of you as well. If not, you can ask for it, because I think it's really important for you to know who's participating so you can get to know each other and have the most effective appointments possible.
We have a few more questions. One of them is, will this presentation be available after this?
It sure will. We're recording this live now, and as soon as we're able, we will do whatever we have to do to make it a URL and post it on the Capitol Hill Day page of mentoring.org. So if you go to mentoring.org, at the top of the screen, you'll see, I think it says the advocacy button, and one of the drop downs from the advocacy button is Capitol Hill Day. Or you could just go to mentoring.org/Capitol Hill Day. You'll find it there as well. But that's where we'll link it. We'll also include a link to it in our communications over the next few weeks. And that reminds me, I forgot to remind all of you that you will be receiving weekly communications either from myself, Adriane, Max, or one of our affiliate executive directors who are serving as state captains. And so if you have any questions, go to your state captain first. If you don't know who your state captain is, please, of course, feel free to email Adriane or myself, and we'll make sure to connect you with the right person.
Abbie, is Mentor still scheduling all the meetings, or could we schedule some of our meetings on our own?
So we are scheduling appointments for you. If you have a personal relationship with congressional office or something like that, reach out to us and let us know what you're thinking, and we'll work with you. The reason we're doing it for you is so that we can keep an eye on when other appointments from your state are scheduled. We don't want to have 2 appointments at 10 o'clock on the 30th, and people can't attend. So we're trying our best to keep your schedules clear. But if you have some specific reason that you want to reach out, or if you want to follow up after we make the initial ask, we're happy to coordinate with you. Just reach out to myself or Adriane.
There are a number of folks who work for local government agencies and will want to know if they're still allowed to participate in Hill Day. Yeah,
as far as I know, I don't know why you wouldn't. Obviously, if you work for a government entity, I would just double check with your supervisors, make sure that there isn't some rule or reason otherwise. Some people like to ask us if this is considered lobbying. The short answer, the IRS answer is no. One day, a few hours of participation in this, what's called a fly-in, this Capitol Hill Day does not constitute lobbying. However, some agencies and some organizations that are in part or fully funded by taxpayer dollars do have rules about their employees' participation. So just cover your backside and check with your supervisor. But the short answer is it shouldn't be a problem. And if, for instance, you happen to be federally funded, if your program is in part or fully funded by federal dollars, you definitely want to check with your federal grant supervisor.
Are there places to get lunch on Capitol Hill?
Yes, there are many, and we actually have a document that we're going to post on the Capitol Hill page of mentoring.org that will list all of those for you. It also gives you a little information on how each congressional building is set up. So hopefully that will make things really easy for you guys.
Is the welcome reception open to everyone or just participants of Capitol Hill Day?
It is open to everyone, and we encourage you to bring your Summit colleagues, and if your spouses or family or friends came with you, they are welcome to join you as well. It is open to everyone, and as Adriane said, there is a really spectacular view of the Capitol Dome lit up at night right outside the reception room that really shouldn't be missed, so I hope you join us.
Do you know how large each group from each state will be?
Each state has a different size group. We do have quite a few states so far already that have topped 15, 20, 25 participants. I would say the average is probably 5 to 8 people-ish, but the honest answer is it depends. If you want to know specifically about your state or a state, reach out to Adriane and we'll help you out.
How much time do we have in between meetings to get to the next building?
That's a great question. I can't answer that specifically for you right now, but I can tell you that Adriane, Max, and I do our level best to group your House meetings and your Senate meetings together so you don't have to walk back and forth across the complex several times. We may not be able to do that for all of you, but we will try our level best. We often try to pad at least 15 to 20 minutes between meetings. So let's say your state will have 2 or 3 House meetings before you head over to the Senate side for your Senate meetings. We'll try to pad 15, 20, 30 minutes in between those meetings in case your first meeting runs long or you run into a security delay or something like that. We try our best to give you enough time to get to your meetings. To that point, you will see if you have a House meeting, for example, at 11 o'clock, we're going to assume that wraps up around 11:30. You would not see us schedule you a Senate meeting until 12 o'clock at the earliest, and maybe even 12:15, 12:30. We really try to pad enough time for you, particularly when you have to make that walk from either the House side or the Senate side or back.
Is there shuttle service back to the hotel after the welcome reception?
There is not, but there are 2 very easy ways to get back to the hotel, and we will actually provide this to you both on the Capitol Hill Day page of mentoring.org and as a handout at the welcome reception. You can cab back, obviously. You can just hop in any cab and tell them the address of the hotel. They'll take you there, no problem. You can also take the Metro back, and we have given very detailed instructions on how to use the Metro, what line you need. It's a pretty simple shot. You don't even have to change trains to get back to, if you're staying at the Summit Hotel, the Renaissance downtown.
Are we going to review the bills that we just talked about during the advocacy workshop?
We sure are, and in much greater detail. And we will welcome questions at that event as well, if in case for some reason something is unclear. We want to make sure everyone feels comfortable talking about the bills and issues.
Does Mentor have talking points for the group?
Yes, we do. Actually, we have talking points kind of about mentoring writ large. We include a few compelling data points from our most recent national survey data on adults' attitudes and feelings about mentoring, which has some really great stuff, by the way. I'm sure we'll see some of that pop up during the plenary sessions at the summit as well. And then we also have talking points about who Mentor is and what the National Mentoring Summit is as well. So hopefully between those, they're all in one document, so hopefully those talking points are very helpful.
Is there any space in these meetings to talk about specific populations that our program serves?
Absolutely, and I would strongly encourage you to do that. I think the clearer the picture you can paint for staff or members of Congress about who you're working with and the outcomes and impact that you've had in their communities, the better.
Will we have the same group of people with us throughout the day?
The answer to that is yes and no. Where you might see your fellow state colleagues kind of disperse and then come back together is on the House side. So all of you should theoretically have at least 3 congressional meetings on the 30th, or at least that's our goal for you. You have 2 U.S. senators, so each of you should attend a meeting with your senators, and 1 U.S. House representative. So our goal is to make sure that you get to those meetings. Now, for instance, if you come from a state and there's a relatively small group of you, maybe 5 or 6 of you total from that state, chances are we will try to get you all to assume all of you want to attend all of the House meetings. Now, of course, if it's not your representative and you'd rather go get a cup of coffee, communicate that to your colleagues. You guys can figure that out. But if it's a relatively small group, we try to keep you together throughout the day. If you're from one of those states, like California or Pennsylvania or Tennessee or Texas, who have really big participants, delegations, which is fantastic, we're going to break you guys up a little bit more and try to make sure you get to as many of your representatives as possible, but then bring you back together for your Senate meetings.
That's the last of our questions. If anyone has any more, they can enter them into the question box.
Right. Those were some good questions, guys. While we're waiting to see if there's any additional questions that pop up, I just wanted to say, again, thank you. As we've said now, I think at least twice, we're recording this. So by the magic of technology, we will turn it into a link and post that on the Capitol Hill Day page of mentoring.org. And we will be sure to email that out in our future communications. You should get at least weekly communications from us between now and when you come here to DC for the summit. But of course, if you have any questions or for some reason you haven't been receiving our communications or don't in the next week or so, just shoot Adriane or myself an email or give us a phone call, and we most certainly will do our best to help you out.
We have one more question.
Okay.
Someone would like to know, how will they know who is in their group from their state before they get here?
Yeah, so one way is in the weekly communications, either Adriane, myself, or Max send out, or one of our wonderful colleagues from our state affiliates have sent out. We attach a Word document that lists all of the participants from that state. If you have not received that information, email your state captain or shoot Adriane or myself an email and we'll help you out.
That's it.
Okay. Well, Max, Adriane, and I will stay on the line for a few more minutes just in case 1 or 2 more questions pop up. But again, thank you very much for your time. We fit that into just under 1 hour, so we're getting better every year, a little more efficient. Thank you guys so much. We can't wait to see you here in DC in just a few short weeks. Right. All right, guys, it looks like there's no more questions, so we're going to call it a day. But feel free to shoot us an email or give us a phone call if you have any questions. And thanks again.